Anyway, I think we were having a really interesting discussion on PMax and like sort of what happens with PMax and why it's so volatile sometimes. Um, the point I was trying to make, and I don't know if this is too little context here, I think if you try to narrow down on PMax too quickly, so before it's really learned enough, it can get very like myopic, like it can get super narrow, like it can just be blinded and
Yeah.
you can actually miss out on a lot of different audiences that might also convert really well if you had just given it the chance to test out and experiment with those audiences as well. Um,
I think it's an iteration of stuff we learned a few years ago with the way search campaigns and display and shopping were working. Like 5 years ago, everything was super, super granular still. There wasn't a lot of automated anything. And it was better to use exact match and have very specific targeting and manual CPC, everything that worked the best 5, 6 years ago. Uh, Things changed. And then we started realizing you can over optimize now on Google
mm,
Ads. And you can bring a lot of your kind of prejudices and preconceived notions
yeah,
along into a campaign, and it can really actually harm the performance. And so now a lot of times the best performing campaigns, they are broad because Google is reaching some, like, algorithmically, some people and some terms that you wouldn't always think of. Less like there's still a lot of error in that system. It always produces problems and waste, and that's regretful. And I wish we had the data to see all those mistakes. But PMax specifically is a little smarter and feels like it's getting smarter. And a lot of times, like, it's kind of like we were talking earlier, PMax doesn't really have a learning period
mm,
as much as it's just constantly learning. And over time, it accumulates enough knowledge that if you have a healthy PMix campaign, it will probably work pretty well, just not on autopilot for sure, because sometimes it experiments and finds something
mm, mm.
like incorrect and starts feeding off that. But generally, like, it's it's always learning, like always learning,
I
but
do
it will
think that
settle
like
out into something.
PMax, like if you so like how I view it, like doing this stuff every day, it's like PMax feels like it's extremely powerful to me, but I feel it's very hard for most people to understand. Like clients, business owners, even like a lot of PPC people still have difficulties really grasping, what happens with PMax and like what it's doing. But like once you sort of understand that it's learning and that there's the risk of underfitting or overfitting, right? These are just two, like for people who don't know, these are two statistical concepts of if you make a model, if you train a learning model, a machine learning model, or if you train any model on data, if the data set is too small, right? So if you've got a group of people and you draw conclusions, you can't always just apply those conclusions to another audience, right? If you have a very small audience and you get very narrow, that's called overfitting. Like you're super narrow, and whatever your model has learned at this point totally does not apply anymore to other audiences.
Mhm.
Like to the most narrow, like in the most narrow way you could see it is it only applies to maybe one person, right? Like that's the most narrow you can get. That's the most overfitted you can be. And if you have all the information in the world of one particular person, you could sell them probably anything, right? Because you know
Right.
exactly how to sell that to someone. But now, if you tried those methods to someone else, it wouldn't work anymore, right? So,
Yeah.
and then that's overfitting. The opposite is underfitting. It's basically when you're so broad, you try to apply to everyone, but nothing happens because you don't really have enough data to make a
Right.
decision. You, as the manager of the PPC campaign or of the PMax campaign, you really need to understand where you're at with the model. Like how optimized are you? Like are you at a point where you could expand it? Are you at a point where you could make changes because the model is stable enough that it can start experimenting and start fitting because that's what it is, right? It's a fitting model. Once it starts like is there enough room to fit properly? And if there is, suddenly you'll see, oh, I've increased budgets, or I've increased the T ROAS, or I've lowered the T ROAS, and I'm getting better performance, right? If you make huge changes, you risk either not spending at all, so that's overfitting because it's like I can't find any other situation like the one I've been optimized for, or you just risk underfitting and it's like I'm just going to spend all your money, right? Because it doesn't know
Right.
anything yet and it wants to learn, right? Because that's how the model works. It wants to get data, and if you suddenly increase your budget a lot, it might just spend it all and get you no results because there's been no indicator because these things can't think, right? Not in the way that we think. It just sees, oh, you're willing to spend $300 a day, right? And you have no constraints on that. It's like the PMax campaign is going to want to spend that $300 for the next 3 weeks to learn what's going on, right? Whereas if you had done that with $50, it would have done the same thing, right? Like it would have
And
also
and
learned.
so much of that is applicable when you're talking about the your bidding strategy
Yeah.
and picking that, between max conversions or TROAS or TCPA or whatever you choose, like you have to know the time and the place for each of those. If you turn on PMax, brand new campaign on max conversions, like there is no conversion knowledge within the PMax campaign, and you're going to spend your entire budget with no results
Yeah.
until maybe give it a week or so, and then you finally start getting results. But you get those the hard way. You spent too much to learn that. So instead, you should find something that's more either like there's some sometimes you have to play and test different bidding strategies, but it really is about knowing which model to apply at what stage of a campaign, and also realizing that the PMax campaign is not just learning from your campaign, but also any other PMax campaign out there. And the narrower your niche is, the less it knows about that specific topic. And that is frustrating because we have no control over that part.
Yeah.
But it's so if you're selling hiking boots, there are a million hiking boots out there being sold by thousands of advertisers every second of the day, probably. Like, so if you have a store that's selling hiking boots, PMax is the PMax, the system knows what you're
Mm.
talking about. That's, I think it in a way it's the overfitting, underfitting, except just in Google's back end. If you have some weird niche product that just either people don't know they want, or there's just not many people looking for it, or Google doesn't understand what it is, PMax is going to be really difficult. It won't have that built-in systemic knowledge of like, oh, this is a pen for people in zero gravity. Like, okay, like there's three people that need that right now. Google has no idea what you're selling. PMax will be a disaster.
Yeah. Unless you just like grab your local NASA center and you just fucking put like a geo radius around it.
And then all of a sudden, yeah, you target like Huntsville and
Yeah.
like JPL, and it's like, oh, this PMax campaign worked great somehow.
It's like,
But
why
in
am I
reality, you
going?
should have just, when it's that narrow, you should
Yeah.
just drive there in a
But like,
truck and
I
like,
think that's a good demonstration of sort of the concept because like, well, you know that, right? Like, or like we both know where people would be who would buy zero gravity pens, right? But like if you were to just let that loose on like the United States, like you would never, like there's this other statistical concept, convergence, right? You would never like reach convergence because it's just ridiculous. Like you'd have to go, like how would it be able to ever figure out with no prior knowledge how to get
yeah.
to the NASA center, in Huntsville, right? How would it get there? It wouldn't. Like it would just take so much
Yeah, you
time.
have 330 million people, and maybe 3,000 of them will ever be in zero gravity.
Yeah.
So, yeah, exactly.
And that's an extreme example, obviously, but like it is, like it's interesting to think about how you as a as a PPC person or business owner need to think about the strategy and about sort of how to steer it, right? Because you've got an incredible machine that you're managing. Like I cannot do all the adjustments and all the automation that PMax does, right? Like it's constantly checking everything. It's checking whether shopping's working better, whether your typical demand gen campaign is doing better, right? Whether Gmail is doing better, or YouTube, or display, or search is checking whether or not mobile on search is better, or whether or not computer
Yeah.
on Gmail is better. Like it does so much automation. Like no human person could ever do that. But what it can't do is
Yeah.
strategize properly, right? It can't actually, you know, steer itself. Well, not yet, but
And it's not perfect. I do feel like it's getting better. It's getting much better than from when it was launched, but it still requires some massaging.
oh
Like
yeah,
it, and sometimes it just requires pausing, creating a whole new PMax campaign, starting from scratch. Like sometimes it feels like the model can almost suffocate itself with knowledge,
yeah,
and it's like I'm not really sure why, but it's almost like depression comes with intelligence or something. It's like this it's like Marvin the paranoid android from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. It's like he's just so smart that he just like eventually kills himself, and
yeah,
it feels like PMax does the same thing. It's like okay, it's pulling so much in, and it has like analysis paralysis, and it just shuts down. And at that point, sometimes like you have to have the strategic knowledge to recognize that pattern. It's like, oh, this has happened before. We're just going to start a new PMax campaign. And
yeah.
sometimes that works, and it kickstarts it again. That's, that is really rare though nowadays, like less so than it used to be.
Yeah, I think
And you have
most
to wait a
people
long time.
like what I think happens is most new people have a hard time with the underfitting side, right? Where it's just spending like crazy and nothing's happening. And like to be honest, a lot of the times like that's also just because they might not have their conversion tracking set up properly, right? Like
Yeah,
like it can be other
yeah,
fundamental stuff, and like Google pushes PMax a lot. Like I'm not gonna say that PMax has not it's not perfect. Like if you don't know how to use it, like you can really put your money on fire. Um,
yeah. For
so like
PMax, you have to have conversion tracking set up. And ideally, it should be Shopify linked directly into Google Ads so you have live updated
yeah,
feedback for Google Ads to learn from. If not, you're asking for a disaster. Yeah.
that's also interesting. Like it's super fast. Like when you actually like
Mhm.
ping the Shopify events into Google, like you're super fast with PMax. Like it's funny because like I like like in my own tests I see that sometimes like you just standard shopping actually takes a day or two sometimes even to show up. Well, PMax same day.
Mhm.
It's like it shows up
Yeah.
immediately. It's super fast. Another
Yeah.
interesting topic I've noticed with PMax, and like, because we were talking before, and this was before we started the stream, unfortunately, or when we started the stream with my microphone muted, that PMax can get very stable, like surprisingly stable or very consistent if you use it well.
Mhm.
One thing I've also noticed is that PMax can actually work well if shopping doesn't work because it's too competitive. So I've got an
Mhm.
example. I'm working with a client at the moment where one of the largest retailers in the United States entered the auction, and our shopping campaigns completely tanked. Like we were just game over, right? And that went on for like around 10 days, and there was just not really a lot we could do anymore because it's a small account, and we have been advertising for around 4 or 5 months, and we've been getting pretty good results, but it looked like we were out of the game. Using PMax, we are now actually able to perform consistently again. And I think that's a really cool thing with PMax. And sort of the point I'm trying to make or trying to allude to or get to is that, you can do a lot more niche work also in PMax, and you can really leverage your creative skills in terms of imagery, in terms of videos,
Yeah.
in terms of headlines, in terms of like descriptions that you
It
wouldn't be
it
able to.
does find placements that you simply couldn't get with shopping or search
Yeah.
that are sometimes handy for stuff like that. Um, the creative part of it is and probably can't be emphasized enough because a lot of our campaigns, even if say we inherit a PMax campaign that's been running and say it's only working moderately okay,
Mhm.
half the time we can apply just great assets like videos and images and all sorts of stuff, and it just starts working way better. So that is a hidden kind of secret that it's very much a black box, but it works.
Yeah.
Who knows where you can't really tell where those placements are all the time with PMax,
Like that's
but it
super
works.
interesting. Like I can't like I was at a point where I was like, well, I think I'm gonna go have to tell the client that like we're just gonna have to stop because they're not
Yeah,
profitable and like this is not gonna work. But PMax can be a yeah, like it can be a great way to get into like those niches or little audience pockets or whatever, right? Like these little parts of the internet where you're getting very personalized and very targeted placements that you really wouldn't be able to get otherwise,
hmm
and that I think your competition can't really get to that easily either, right? Like if you're so niche, you've got good creative, you've got good headlines, you can actually find those people that your audience or that your competition might not so easily be able to find because you're so much more unique in what you're showing as with your ads, right?
yeah,
It's very hard
yeah,
to like what I'm trying to say is like on shopping, it's very easy to both be going after the same click, right?
right.
Whereas if you're
There's
showing,
basically one placement and one form of an image.
yeah,
Y- yeah,
but like one good video could work on so many like one video ad, right? Or creative could work on so many different videos where another video by a competitor would not work on
yeah.
that same video. And that's crazy to
And
me
it
because
also simply because PMax does do a lot of auto generation of creative, and 9 times out of 10 they're just terrible, terrible. So anything, literally anything, is better than PMax's native generated
like
like
literally just
media.
you grabbing your phone and just recording
That would be better.
whatever. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
so bad. Honestly, Gil,
yeah.
like I've got like I've had two PMax campaigns that just kept getting the YouTube quality check violation, right? And it was on the fucking auto generated stuff. So it's like you're
They're
flagging
flagging
me.
their own.
Yeah, you're flagging me
Yeah.
for the videos you create.
One of the one of the worst I saw was this was lead gen, and it was for a legal related service. So pretty like professional. It was like legal accounting or something like that. And the PMax video had this jangly happy like kids tune. So it was the most like incongruent video I've
Yeah.
ever seen. It was like it sounded like the Wiggles were like advertising for this legal firm. Eh, So it doesn't take much. It just takes some like
Yeah.
suitability. And AI isn't there yet. Clearly, it takes some taste.
Yeah, it's
So
yeah, the auto generated stuff is very interesting. It's always the same too. It's like they just a colorful background with some abstract like squares and
looks like a really
stuff.
bad PowerPoint. It's just kind of
Yeah,
going like
yeah, exactly. Those old like 2000 movie transitions, you know? It's
yeah,
like
it's like Windows Movie Maker from Windows XP. Yeah.
it's amazing. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Like it feels like they're trying to be very safe with it, but it really does not look good. Like
Yeah.
it's
No,
bad.
it's pretty bad.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's pretty interesting about PMax. I yeah, again, like I'm a fan of it, but I'm a fan of it because I know how to work with it. I don't actually think PMax is great for new advertisers or new businesses because it's so easy to set up
No.
and it's so easy to go in the wrong direction with.
Yeah, it's not great for tiny budgets. It's not great for new advertisers. It's not great for people who don't have a lot of conversion and history in their account already. Uh, in my maybe slightly uninformed opinion,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure if that's I can back that statement up with data, but it just feels like that's true.
Mm-hmm.
But it has worked really, really well for some of our like larger long-term clients that have, been advertising on shopping for years. Um, yeah, it's usually pretty bad for lead gen. It
Yeah.
always has been, still is. From time to time, it works really well, but I don't think anyone knows for sure why.
Yeah,
Um,
I find it even more complicated for lead gen, if I'm honest. Like with shopping, it's pretty like I can just intuitively think about it and get to like pretty decent conclusions. But with lead gen, it's hard. Like it's very hard.
yeah. Um, I I like PMax. There's some folks that have really insightful stuff on PMax. Mostly, Ed Leak has a good like 2 hour video. I think is on YouTube for free on it, which I recommend for the people to watch if they don't know anything about PMax. Minicum knows quite a bit about PMax and has a couple good articles on him. Um, I there's so much that PMax needs to fix, and I know it's priority for Google Ads. Like they are putting more features and manpower behind PMax than search,
Oh yeah.
which is maybe a sad thing.
It's
But
just like I think with PMax, I think those resources are great. I learned a lot from them, like the ones you both mentioned. It's just with PMax, to me, it feels like a lot of the learning happens just watching it. Like it sounds super zen, right? Just look at it, just observe, and just like try to be aware of what it's doing. That's been the way that I've learned. Like as much about it as I know right now, it's just really looking what it does because it does too much. I don't think you can
I think
really
that's
know
the
what's
nature of
going
the
on.
beast when you have like I'm not going to call it AI necessarily because I think it's
Mm,
more machine learning,
yeah,
but when you have a very, very complex machine learning model, it evolves by itself over time. So even though you might learn the basics of how this works, I don't think I honestly don't know if anyone actually can sit down and look at it and say, this is exactly what it's doing. Because you can sense and you can pretty much like it's math. At the end of the day, it's
yeah,
math and it will do
yeah,
something. It's a curve and
yeah,
but but it is also a continually evolving curve. And that comes with a lot of problems. Um, Mostly, which is just granular control. And you can't really control something that's evolving continually.
yeah, yeah. Like yeah, that's it. It's math. It's it's you just. I guess the best way to say is you just learn how to make good guesses with it. Like, and that just sounds so bad
Yeah.
because we're supposed to
Well,
be.
it's kind of like riding a bike. Like you can get the idea for the mechanics of it. You get the concept of it. Okay, I pedal, I balance, I go forward. That is not riding a bike. That's just
Thinking
the
about
ABCs
riding a
of
bike.
operating
Yeah.
and thinking and strategizing about operating the bike. You don't know how to ride a bike until you've fallen down a few times.
Yeah.
Like it's just, and then you sense how you ride the bike.
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
I think
so
like if we look at where advertising is going a little bit, or at least where something PMax is going, I think being able to develop intuition is going to be very useful. Like just
not only useful, but like possibly the single most critical thing that separates you from the machine.
Yeah.
Um, there's a lot of hubbub about AI replacing people, and it
Mm.
definitely will replace a lot of work and a lot of entry level stuff. But so far, I see no indications that it will replace anyone with
I mean, the way
a
I'm
critical
thinking about
mind.
it is that if it's able to replace that as well, right, then it means it's basically a perfect economic agent, right? And if it's at that
Right.
point, it's just an infinite money printer, right? Like, so,
And it clearly isn't.
yeah, it
So
clearly isn't, right?
I,
Like, if it
yeah,
was, like, if that was the case, then like there would be like bigger problems than just PMax
yeah,
replacing like us PPC
right.
people, right? Like,
Yeah, if it's that smart, it should be stock trading by now.
yeah, exactly. It should be, it should be on the market because it could make you trillions.
Yeah, yeah.
Shouldn't be trying to
If
get
it's
you to
that
do
smart, I should be able to spin up an e-commerce store and be a billionaire tomorrow if I
yeah.
put the right, ROAS target in. Yeah,
But it's not, and we're still here, still doing PPC.
yeah, and yeah.
So we
Here I am
talked a little
clicking
bit about
around
like
in the
thinking about how it
ad setting.
learns and thinking how it expands and how what's going on. I think like a big idea about it is that at least what I see is like it goes through expansion and contraction cycles where it either tests new stuff or it prunes what it's done that didn't work, right? That's what I expect a healthy PMax campaign to do. Like right when you're just starting out, when you're just start running a campaign, to see maybe a day when you're spending almost all of your budget, and then maybe another day where it's maybe half, or maybe
Do you see those cycles changing according to budget or um, niche? Like, is it, I know it's a little predictable
mm,
for per campaign,
mm,
but does that change? Do they have a like from your estimation, do they have a calendar cycle or do they have a volume cycle? Is it every
definitely
10,000
volume,
data points or is it
definitely volume
like
based.
okay,
It's knowledge based, like it's information, uh,
yeah.
information and knowledge
That's
based.
that's what I think too.
I don't think
Just
it's
simply comparing.
oh, we're gonna do this day and then that day. I do think it does. Like I do think it does planning actually. I do have a sense that PMX does do more than 1 day long planning. Like that sounds a little bit crazy maybe, but like I do have a sense that it does today this test, tomorrow that test. I do think
Mhm.
it goes in that
Yeah.
direction because I have noticed that when you make changes, it can like especially like when you do that sort of when you expect it to do the change the next day, it really gets confused. So if it's doing
Yeah.
one test on day one, or maybe it's expanding on day one, and then you make it contract, it can get really messed up,
Yeah.
right? Or if it's on a day where it's already in this sort of contracting cycle, and then if you try to make it even more narrow, there's a very high likelihood you can't get it out of that anymore. Like,
Yeah.
like that's something that I have noticed. So it does do some sort of multi-day long planning. Um,
I think it also doesn't just go from, you know, sequentially from one to the next. I think it A B tests, A B C D E F tests
yep, yep,
constantly
yep.
and drags those over the course of many days, I think, because like when we used to run shopping or search campaigns manually, it was always very dangerous to look at 1 or 2 or 3 days and take that as gospel truth because you have so much variance between weekend
Yeah,
shopping, holidays, paychecks,
yeah,
so much variance with just people that it's best to look over a week or a month to gauge how performance is. So I think PMax throws some of the calendar cycle in along with
mm.
the
I
volume
mean, it
cycle.
must know
This
that
is
there's.
I don't yeah, this is just total guess from my part. I think I think they have long term like just seeding little tests throughout
Yeah,
the week.
I mean, this is also again another. I mean, like it's interesting because us PPC people were basically just becoming more and more AI managers, kind of at the point,
Yeah.
right? And like I do think that they have certain markers like inside the learning model that might actually just be a little bit hardwired. You know, like sort of like just as you
Right.
have training data, they might just have training markers or whatever that are just like, okay, well, Christmas is on this day, right? Or Black Friday is on that day, and there's typically an increase in demand. I definitely think
Right.
that's in there. But one thing I do
Totally.
notice is that like for one, if you really start looking at your order curves, especially like when you start, and then if you compare like say day one to day two to day three, you can see that it's adding the curves together to see if there's another demand curve that's more optimal in there. You can literally
Hmm.
see like, oh, I've got a peak on this day, and on the other day I had a peak at another time. It's gonna try and see if it can bridge those two peaks. That's
Hmm.
really cool. Like it's really cool to see that sort of happen live because then
That's
it's like
interesting.
you start like paying attention to that stuff. You start to understand that it how it optimizes, and that really helps with understanding like how to steer it as well. But the point I wanted to make is that what I've seen is that like the first weekend it does, it's not performing that great. But then the second
Hmm.
weekend, it realized that the past weekend was really good, right? Because and I'm talking about
Hmm.
e-commerce here, people buy more on the weekends, right? Then the second
Hmm.
weekend it does, it starts getting more sales because it now has
Hmm.
that previous data that said, oh wait, these 2 days are different than my weekdays, right? Whereas in the weekdays I might be going after, the afternoon, right? Because then people are home from work and they decide to buy stuff. It seems to need to go through that period of not getting the conversions to know that next time
Yeah.
it runs into that same situation, it does something differently. Like that's sort of the impression I get.
I agree with that. And I also think something it does is it's like a sort of self-matching to other
Mm-hmm.
campaigns in the PMax.
I've not thought about that
Um,
yet, but that's super interesting.
and I don't think Google has come out and said this in
Okay.
so many words. So this may be just total BS, but so you take it with a grain of salt. But I'm pretty sure that what it's doing over time is building a kind of a fingerprint of this campaign and comparing it with other similar campaigns
Mm-hmm.
and with maybe similar products or similar audiences or whatever. And then that's why you kind of see things settle out often. Or you see you see just really high prices right off the bat, like cost per click prices,
Mm-hmm.
because it quickly fingerprints and then realizes, no, you will be spending $7 a click on this, even though you have your bidding set up some other way. I think that's
Yeah.
why a lot of PMax campaigns, if you over optimize at the beginning,
Mm-hmm.
you never quite see the traction or volume because it fingerprints your campaign, compares it to other
Yeah. Right.
other accounts,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like you're not even starting. There's no way you're not going to get a $2 cost per click on
But
this. Um,
doesn't like I mean shopping already does this and Google says it does like with the what are they called the GTINs I think like the product IDs
yeah,
right
yeah,
like the trade identification number or something like it does
yeah.
global
Global
trade yeah
global
global trade
trade. Yeah,
yeah so with those it already does that where like if you share the same global trade identification number it uses that data and like Google is open about
yeah,
this. Like they say like, well, yeah, like if you're selling the same product, we do
yeah.
compare. Like and like you do benefit from other people who are advertising the same product.
Yeah, I think PMax is exactly the same way with those product specific things, especially when it shows in a shopping placement. I am not so sure, and this is maybe just my ignorance, but I'm not so sure how much other data is shared.
Do you think it
I
uses like
think it's a
those
lot.
like do you think it's really using the end market and like the affinity audiences a lot? Because those just don't really do much for me when I use it on shopping or anything else. Like it's just
It's a really good question. I don't have the answer to. Those audiences have worked for us it seems like those, audiences and the affinity, the in market, the
Hmm.
custom customer match stuff. Sometimes it works great, and sometimes it doesn't work at all. I am not a fan of a lot of that.
Yeah, same.
Um, it, sometimes it feels it makes it much more expensive without necessarily a correlating uptick in sales.
Hmm.
It just feels expensive. It feels like it cuts your placements down too much
Yeah,
artificially almost.
yeah, yeah. I don't really
Um,
like. I don't know about you guys, but I don't really use those a lot. I mean, like maybe the only thing I use in the setup might be the search terms, where I might just add a couple
yeah,
search terms to help with the initial
yeah,
signal that you give it. But
right. Treating it as more of a signal and not a command is probably pretty
yeah,
important
absolutely,
there.
they're not.
But
Yeah, because
um,
PMax, it just has the goal to get you conversions and to get you sales and to get you progress.
yeah,
It listens to you, but in a very roundabout, indirect way, and also in a way that you might not expect it to, right? Like I said this earlier to you today. Like you can be at 150 ROAS target and still get a 3 or 4 actual
right,
ROAS, right? Like it's not going to stop at 150. It's not just going to say,
right,
okay, I'm done, right? But a lot of people think that's how it works, and I think the reason that is because they get in the trap of over optimizing, and then they start to see
mhm,
that the ROAS has such a, or the T ROAS has such an impact on the campaign, right? Whereas in a normal, healthy, stable situation, it really shouldn't really impact it so much. Like you can be at 150 and get 2, 3, 4x ROAS. Like it's not just going to stop. And that also makes sense, right? Because you're going after traffic of people who are likely interested in your product. It's not like PMax is suddenly got to show up on their browser and be like, Gil,
yeah.
no, you can't buy.
Well, and I
It's a
guess
pop
that
up.
yeah, it's my like digital shopping mother. Um,
The
uh,
advertiser of this
it kind
product
of
has earned enough.
right, right.
Yeah. No, like
it
that. Yeah.
it makes me wonder though, like, and this probably more than anything concerns me for the future of Google Ads because historically Google Ads was so powerful because of its keyword focused, targeting that is intent based. And that's why I have always preferred Google ads over Facebook ads
Same.
because I'm not targeting audiences or demographics. I'm targeting anybody who wants
You're
this
targeting
thing,
psychology,
this
really.
service.
Like,
Yeah. But it feels almost with the addition of, the affinity audiences and things like this, it feels like Google's like flirting with the idea of of paid social.
yeah.
It's okay. It can work. It clearly works really well for a lot of people, but I want my old Google ads where, like, no, I want someone searching for my service or product
Yeah.
now, like, because I can sell to those people. If someone is looking for a Nike shoe in this color, guess what? I have it at this price and I want to show up. Not,
Yeah.
oh, this person's a 19-year-old with some disposable income, maybe he'd like a shoe. No, I don't want to force my product on someone who doesn't want it. That to me is where PMax is
I think
dangerously becoming a little too
I think that's also
um,
the reason why PMax just doesn't work that great for lead gen because it's so audience and signal
yeah,
based. Like it's like I was talking with a client earlier today, and they had been running some Facebook ads. And they were not getting results, and they were doing this independently of my work, and they were just
yeah,
like yeah, it's not really going anywhere. And I told them like, well, you're doing lead gen. Like sure you can maybe, and like this isn't a home services niche. And it's like, sure, you can maybe find people who maybe have high income, who just moved, right, who are homeowners, but that doesn't mean they actually want to get what you're
right,
selling right now. It means they might, like, sure, they're more
exactly.
likely to, like, to want it than someone who's renting and who has been renting for years and who has like no desire to, install something or whatever, right? But like for
Yeah.
e-commerce, it can make sense because if you're into sports and if you're on the field every 2 days of the week, and then suddenly you see new sport shoes for the sport you like yeah, you might just decide to buy it. The threshold is a lot lower to like the matching is a lot easier than with lead gen because lead gen is just usually so specific.
Yeah, we had a client, which complex context behind it, but very like B2B, very high cost, very niche service. They were spending a lot on Google Ads. Uh, Google Ads, we proved this through tracking, was their biggest source of leads, biggest source of revenue.
Mm.
It was granted very expensive. They were getting very high cost per click, very high cost per acquisition, but technically they were still getting about a 20x ROAS because they would spend about $500 to get a client, which feels expensive, and then the client would spend $20,000. So, in my mind, from a purely business perspective, that sounds fantastic. I will gladly spend $500 in order to make 20,000. But so basically had some internal issues and they decided, no, we can't spend, we've got to diversify. We're spending too much on Google Ads. We're happy with the results, but we've got to spend more on social. We're going and spending on Instagram.
Yeah.
And it's just a huge mistake. It was a massive strategic mistake because Instagram is like PMax on steroids. Basically, all demographics and affinity audiences, and that's it. Nobody searches anything on Instagram except their friends' usernames. So, like, sure, maybe they do know that they want to reach this sort of person, but what percentage of any sort of subset of audience or people want to spend $20,000 on your service right now? Like, not many. Doesn't matter. Like,
I
so
gotta browse
that's
Instagram and suddenly decide to like call up
it's like,
someone.
oh yeah, I need that. I need that right now. I'm gonna
I forgot
embark
about
upon this 3-month project that costs $20,000 because I really like this ad.
yeah.
It's like,
Like the only time you are spending that money is because right now your roof is leaking and you need it
yeah,
fixed, right?
either you're working at a company and you've been tasked with completing this project this quarter,
Yes.
or you're at home, your furnace doesn't work, you're cold and shivering and you need a replacement now.
Yeah.
You're not browsing Instagram. It's like, hey honey, hey, let's put a new furnace in. And she's like, okay. Like,
Sure. Like even like and like you might think to yourself, even like, oh, what about all those people who are making crazy money, right? Who've got the disposable income? Even they don't do this. Like
no.
this is consumer psychology. People buy things when the
Yeah.
problem arises, not
And I am honestly afraid that Google Ads internally is maybe losing sight of that psychology in a lot of ways. They're making it a little harder to target those very specific intent focused
yeah.
keywords that we used to target. It's
It's
PMax doesn't
getting
do that.
harder for sure. Yeah,
Yeah,
like
PMax doesn't target keywords anymore. It like actually like
I think PMax really is just a product that they've made for, or that they probably realized works well for e-commerce. Because I don't,
yeah, for sure.
you just don't see PMax on any type of lead gen. Like you just don't.
Yeah. But, I think I I honestly think I know for a fact that very specific exact match keywords worked great for e-commerce a few years ago.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's going away. So it's unfortunate, but maybe Google search goes away. Who
I
knows?
mean,
Maybe
maybe
they
there's
know
going to be
that.
some replacement some new thing that's going to help with lead gen that nobody knows about yet. Some sort of PMax, but more for lead generation. Maybe that's going to be,
It's LSAs.
yeah,
That's LSAs for you.
just
I
pay it
really
for the
hate those. But
leads.
yeah.
Yeah, who knows? It
Yeah.
might happen. I don't know. I don't think search is going to go away. Like search engines as a whole.
I don't think so. Maybe not.
I mean, I did just read a headline on our marketing that young people just use social media to search nowadays.
I That's what I've been hearing. Um, I th- I can't speak from my anecdotal personal experience because I am not a young person on social media, apparently. Um, but I have heard that people just search on TikTok or Instagram or Snapchat, and I just
I mean,
can't
it doesn't
imagine
sound so
though.
weird for me on YouTube. Maybe it's like how to fix. Uh,
YouTube's a little different because I search for things on YouTube like, hey, I'm working on this engine. How do I replace this valve?
yeah,
And there will be five YouTube videos on it. That feels different
right.
than
Feels different than
other
someone who's
social
just
media.
like, "Hey Gil, what's going on?" Like, so you've got your end user.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I don't need some dude like cutout of a dude like pointing at like words on the screen, going like this. It's like this is what you do. Step three. It's like no, I'll just
Watch 5 videos to replace some fucking
yeah,
valve.
yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like, watch now for part two where we'll uncap the tube. Like,
Or- yeah, yeah, yeah. Keep flicking your thumb. You'll figure out how to do this eventually. Our children are screwed. They're screwed.
Yeah.
Yeah. My old man is going to come out of me pretty soon and just, we need to all retire to Wyoming.
Oh, that sounds pretty great.
Yeah.
Pretty amazing.
Uh, Yeah. I get really, really, really jaded staring at the screen all day, looking at Google Ads editor, wondering what the hell this interface means.
All the
It's like
numbers
we're all screwed.
I mean, I like it. I like it still. I like looking at the numbers go up, and when they go down, I like it a little bit less. But
I no, I like it too. I mean, it's literally it's what I've spent my career doing, but it definitely does feel different than when I started 12, 13, 14 years ago. Like it used to be very scrappy,
yeah.
and the tools you used were very scrappy. Google Ads was very simple,
Mm.
and it has gotten so complex and control has gotten away
Do
that
you think the results you can get are better now? Like,
I think they've been democratized.
huh.
Um, I think the average person can probably get better results now, for sure, because we have things like Shopify now.
Mm.
It's like all you need is $30 a month, and you have the best e-commerce website in the world.
It's actually crazy.
Uh, until a few years ago, you were stuck with Drupal or WooCommerce or Magento or some terrible like piece of crap that half the time didn't work.
Mm.
And like when we started our agency 7 years ago, more people were on those WooCommerce, BigCommerce. Well, actually, BigCommerce was pretty decent, but more people were on those platforms than on Shopify or something like centralized. And checkouts were such a problem.
Mm.
Um, People really didn't know how to do Google Ads super well back then, and there was no automated click it, like no wizards back then.
But I don't feel
So
like it's helped. Like, I don't. This is gonna sound weird, but I feel and this is nothing to say that how people don't know how to do ads or how can you be so dumb, but it's like I see so many people they run ads on their own and they just blow money. Like, there's just I think
they've
it's
always
too.
done that,
Yeah, I don't know if there's just too
but
many options or if it's too.
yeah, I think it's been democratized maybe I should say it's been socialized a little
Could be.
more so it's like I think a lot more people are making okay money now, but nobody's making a whole lot of money, like quite like they used to. So
Okay.
I think it's maybe the outcomes are a little more equal, but
Mm.
maybe a little bit less too. Um, for for at least a lot of niches have gone away that we were working with 7 years ago. Uh, yeah, it's long enough ago that I can, I guess, talk about it. But we had a Dutch client actually about 7 years ago. This guy was making $250,000 a month from selling sewing machine parts.
Wow.
And he was just drop shipping sewing machine parts to little old ladies across America. It was incredible. His website was terrible. His images were terrible. I like it was incredible. His budget was pretty low for ad spend, but that sort of thing I haven't seen. It didn't last for very long either. It was
No.
a very short period, a couple of years that it just worked. And then it went away. And I'm not really sure why, except for the fact that it's that whole long tail fallacy where
Mm-hmm.
people think, oh, like, oh, nobody else is doing this. Well, by now,
Blue
everybody's
ocean
doing everything.
strategy,
But
like
the further back you go, so there was some truth in the mid 2000s. There was some truth in that. And you could find something nobody had built a website for yet. That ended like 10 years ago, maybe, yes, 7 years ago at the latest. Now everybody's doing everything. So
but I
it
do
has been
think that
socialized.
on the flip side, everyone is doing everything, but I think so many people are doing it so poorly that like the real like there's
Yes.
always this sort of like this sort of like you've got the two ends are doing like you'll see the biggest most people are going to be at the bottom or at the top, right? Like that's where you or
Right.
that's where you'll see the like that's what's going to like that's what I typically see at least. It's like either people do extremely well or people who are just not making anything on ads. And then the middle is just man, like just break even or just
Yeah, I think it's become that possibly. I think actually the weight has gone down and that there's a lot more people in the middle than there used to be. I think
huh.
people are still yeah, I for a while there were a lot more, and this is probably getting more abstract than needs to be, but for a while I think there were a lot more smaller advertisers.
Hmm.
And it does feel like people are going mid-market and slowly or dropping off completely, like
Yeah, I
failing
think
and
I
just
think I
dropping
think
off.
that's what happens a lot, where lots of people try and they just drop off because they can't make it work. Like
I
I
think
see so many
we,
posts on Reddit where it's like can PPC even be profitable? I'm like,
yeah,
for real?
like yes, but I think those are the last people on a very long pattern of businesses across the world that had never used the internet, and every single one of them started trying. And eventually they all tried, and only a
Hmm.
few made it. And everybody else is like, nope, I'm not doing
But
anymore. I
those few
tried, I
ones
lost
that are
money.
making it, those are the ones that are basically taking the whole market, right? Because like if you and like I see this in every industry. It's like you see this in SEO, you see this in design or development, where it's always like you've got like the bad players, they just fail. You've got most
Right.
people, they've got some components, right? Right? Like they've got a couple of the crucial like puzzle pieces, however they might have required them from hard work or not like studying others or whatever. They've got some components like working and they're doing like they're getting pretty decent returns. But there are very few who actually have all pieces, who know all the different components, what they do, how they interact, and how to make them work. And I think that little part there, I think they're in any market, I think there are a few people who are actually seniors of that market. Like it's the same thing, like how programming became this huge thing and everyone wanted to be a developer, and then
And
suddenly
then it
like
commoditized.
yeah,
And
and then there were so many junior developers, but like they all just had the basics down, and they couldn't
Right.
find enough senior programmers because it's just hard to find
Yeah.
seniors in anything, whether that's
Yeah. There was a for a while. It's a good example because for a while there was a glut of boot camps and like the coding camps,
yeah,
and you had a bunch of junior level Python scripters, and how many people could actually, you know, write assembly? Like
yeah,
probably not very many. Like
yeah,
they were still the 60-year-old guys that were making $1 million because they could still do like Fortran.
yeah, like super
Um,
old legacy stuff. And I think I think that principle really applies to any industry, whether it's being a business owner in a particular niche or whatever, or doing PPC. That like like the people who have been doing it for years. Like I see it a lot in
mhm.
marketing, right? Like lots of junior marketers are out there, people who constantly jump from SEO to PPC to design or CRO to copywriting. Like they just keep jumping
Yeah,
around. Whereas like once you've been in digital marketing for like 4, 5, 6 years, you start to see that you're consistent. Like that you can
right.
make consistent
Yeah,
results also. Whereas like those first few years, not really. And I think very few people actually get to that point where they're senior, they're consistent, and if you keep doing that and like relating it back to Google Ads, if you're one of the seniors in your niche, likely that you're going to grab the majority of the market. Not like you're not
yeah,
going to have like a 70% market share, but like if you're in a small town and you're doing, like, say, as a PPC manager, you're doing lead gen for a company and you're a senior PPC specialist, you're going to be able to really grow that business because
yeah,
the others just don't have that type of like knowledge. They don't have the skill. They drop off, or they like even like many big spenders still aren't super efficient with their budgets.
right. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I guess I mean, that's kind of been my trajectory. I was just a generalist at first. Um, I guess I started working full time in 2011, and I really was a generalist. Generalist. I had no specialty, um, and it's hard when you're a generalist. I'm going off topic, but you you think you're crippling yourself because you're like, oh, that's work, and I want to do that work. I need to get
Mm-hmm.
paid. Like, yeah, I can design a website, sure,
Yeah.
but in reality, like, and it's honestly, it's good that I did all that in retrospect because now I do know how to design a website.
Mm-hmm.
Just it's not my specialty, but I know the basics. I know CRO. Um, Over time, though, it's just like I filtered out the things I didn't want to do until I literally just do Google Ads.
That's
Um,
crazy, actually.
and that's a very good thing, actually, because, um, yeah, Disco Sloth knows Google Ads. Um, um,
That's it.
yeah, and that's okay. That's it. That's what we're good at.
Well, it's one of those skills that being super specialized in it and being elite really makes a huge difference for clients because it's hard to go against competitors who really know what they're doing. And if
Yeah,
you don't know what you're
especially in
doing,
something as technical as PPC can be, specifically technical things like PPC or
I don't
analytics.
consider it super technical, but lots of people do.
PPC?
Hmm.
Um,
I consider it more
I think
analytical, but
it's
maybe I'm just being annoying.
maybe you're just so smart. Maybe you're just so smart. It's just so easy.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, it's not
I
easy.
think it's no, it's not easy at all. But I I consider it technical because um, if you're not technical, you will fail at PPC.
Fair.
Um, just in terms of the amount of conversion tracking, the amount of data analysis, um, the amount of like just understanding a P&L. Like it, I think it does become, maybe it's not coding. Like I don't do any coding,
Yeah.
but it might not be like software engineering technical, but it's not very creative. It's
Yeah,
often
it's
not
it's
very
very
creative.
I really I see a lot of economics in there. Like you really got to think like economically. You got to think from
Yeah.
like a finance perspective, and very like a lot of analysis. Like I mean that's just sort of like how I view it. I'm like I don't really see it too technical. So you're more just you're doing
So more
analysis.
business,
Yeah, business kind of like
straight up business. Yeah.
business and analytics. Like I think if you can do good marketing analytics, it can really help with PPC also. Like
Hmm.
it's just an all analysis and like interpretations and strategy, advising
Yeah. Maybe
also.
some.
Like I don't know about
Yeah.
you guys, but I constantly have to advise, whether it's explaining things or just like, hey, have you
I think that's
considered this
the
or
biggest part of my job, just talking through problems. Yeah.
right? All
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's the stream. I'm a little tired. It's 10:21 here.
Yeah.
I'm gonna cut part of the stream because
Yeah.
otherwise it's just
Yeah.
you talking and talking into the camera. I'm just
Cool.
like miming, you know. I'm just sort of fake talking. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad
Exactly.
that fellow let us know that because
He
that
just
would have been
joined. He
funny.
just said that, and then he just hopped. I mean,
Like,
thanks, Noah.
thanks, Noah.
Well, I think that was fun. Interesting topic, PMax. Definitely very relevant, I think, for many people, whether you're,
Yeah.
you know, PPC specialist or business owner.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, let's see what we'll cover next week. Maybe something
Yeah.
like
Sounds good.
maybe something like
Yeah.
display. No, let's not do
Display.
display ads. Yeah,
Yeah, I'll think about it.
yeah,
Yeah.
I won't.
Okay.